The daughter-in-law they looked down on. A Nemera story, betrayal. For 12 years, the Ashford family sat Camille at the foot of the table. Never the head, never near it. At every holiday, every birthday, every glittering dinner in that enormous dining room, there was a place set for her as far from the center of the family as the table would allow, and everyone understood, without a word ever being said, exactly what that seat meant. It meant, you are here because our son insisted. It meant, you married up, and you should be grateful. It meant, you will never, ever be one of us. Camille took that seat for 12 years. She smiled. She passed the dishes. She complimented the cook. And she never once gave them the satisfaction of seeing it land. They thought her silence was weakness. They were about to learn it was the most dangerous kind of strength there is. Early CTA. Before we go any further, if stories like this one tend to stay with you, take a moment to subscribe so the next one finds you. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. It always means more than you know to see how far these stories travel. You have to understand who the Ashfords were and who Camille was to feel how wide the gap was that they never let her forget. The Ashfords were old money. 3 generations of it. The kind of family with a name on a hospital wing and a pew with a brass plate. The matriarch, Beatrice, ruled all of it with a soft voice and a spine of pure iron, and Beatrice had decided, the very first time her son Julian brought Camille home, that this would not do. Because Camille was a nurse. She had come from nothing the Ashfords recognized as something. A small apartment, a single mother, a scholarship, a uniform. She worked 12-hour shifts and came home smelling of antiseptic and other people's worst days. To Beatrice, that was not a profession. It was an embarrassment to be managed. A nurse, Beatrice would say to her friends, with a little laugh that did all the work. How selfless of Julian. And Camille heard every one of those laughs. She just chose, every time, what to do with them. Her own mother had given her something the Ashfords' money never could. On her wedding day, her mother had taken her hands and said, "Baby, don't you ever argue with people about your worth. Arguing just tells them it's up for debate. You just be it, quietly, and the right ones will see. And the wrong ones," her mother had smiled, "the wrong ones will find out the hard way. Don't argue, just be it. The right ones will see. Hold on to that. It's the whole story." There were 1,000 small cruelties over those 12 years. Her Christmas gifts, re-gifted in front of her. Her opinions talked over as if she hadn't spoken. Her children, Beatrice's own grandchildren, subtly favored or overlooked depending on how much they resembled the Ashford side. Family decisions made in rooms Camille was never invited into. And the deepest wound of all was not Beatrice. It was Julian. Because Julian loved Camille, that part was real. But Julian had been raised under his mother's soft voice and iron spine, and he had never, in 12 years, found it in himself to stand up at that table and say enough. He would squeeze Camille's hand under the cloth, an apology no one could see, and then he would let it happen again. And again, a quiet apology in private is not the same as being defended in public. Camille knew the difference. She felt it every time she took that seat at the foot of the table. But there was one Ashford who was different. Harold, Julian's father, the man who had actually built the fortune the rest of them merely spent. Harold was old now, and getting older, and somewhere in his 80s his health had begun its long, quiet collapse. And as it did, a remarkable thing became visible, something that revealed exactly what each person in that family was made of. Because when Harold got sick, the family that loved his money discovered they did not much love him. The visits got shorter. The excuses got longer. Beatrice found his decline distasteful, an inconvenience to be staffed out. And the only person, the only one, who sat with Harold Ashford in those long gray afternoons was the nurse they all looked down on. Camille didn't do it for position. She did it because it was who she was. She did it because a frightened old man should not be alone, and because she happened to be very, very good at the one thing that family considered beneath them, caring for a human being. She sat with him. She managed his pain and his pride with equal skill. She talked to him, not to the Ashford fortune, not to the name, but to Harold, the man. She listened to his stories. She held his hand on the bad nights. And Harold Ashford, who had spent a lifetime surrounded by people who wanted what he had, spent his last year with the one person who simply saw who he was. He noticed. Old men notice everything. Harold died on a Tuesday, with Camille beside him, holding his hand. None of the others made it in time. They were, all of them, too busy. And 2 weeks later, the family gathered in a lawyer's office for the reading of the will, the grasping, glittering Ashfords, arranged in their usual order of importance, with Camille seated, out of pure habit, at the back of the room. She did not stay at the back for long, because Harold Ashford, it turned out, had been watching his family for a very long time. He had seen exactly who circled him for his money and who sat with him in the dark. And he had quietly, with his lawyer, rewritten everything in his final year. The bulk of the Ashford estate, the controlling interest in everything, the family home, the name's actual power, did not go to Beatrice. It did not go in equal grasping shares to the children who couldn't be bothered to visit. It went into a trust for Harold's grandchildren. And the trustee, the one person Harold named to hold and steward the entire Ashford fortune, the one hand he chose to place his life's work into, was Camille, the nurse, the woman. They sat at the foot of the table. There was one more thing in that will, and it was the detail that turned the whole room to ash. Because Harold's lawyer explained, gently, that the Ashford lifestyle had been running for years on fumes and appearances, that the real liquidity, the part that actually kept the great house warm and the name afloat, was the part Harold had just placed entirely under Camille's control. The family that had looked down on her for 12 years would now, every single one of them, have to come to Camille. Beatrice, soft voice, iron spine, looked across that office at her son's wife with an expression Camille had waited 12 years to see and had long ago stopped expecting. She looked at her like she was finally, terrifyingly, real. Here is what Camille did with all that power. She did not throw them out of the house. She did not re-gift their cruelty back to them, though heaven knows she could have. She did not become, in her hour of winning, the thing they had been to her. She simply stood up and walked to the front of the room and, for the first time in 12 years, took the seat at the center. And at the next family dinner, in that enormous dining room, Camille sat at the head of the table, not because she'd fought for it, because it had, all along, been hers, and the only person who'd seen that clearly had been a dying old man who knew the difference between people who are rich and people who are worth something. Julian, to his credit, finally found his voice that night, 12 years too late, but he found it, and he sat down beside his wife, at the head of the table, and did not let go of her hand, where everyone could see. It wasn't everything. Some wounds don't close just because the world finally agrees you were right. But it was something. It was, after 12 years, enough. So here is what this one leaves you with. When people decide you are beneath them, they stop watching you carefully. And that is the exact moment your character becomes the only thing that's actually being measured by the people who matter. You cannot argue someone into respecting you. Camille's mother was right. You just be it, quietly, for as long as it takes. The Ashfords spent 12 years certain they knew Camille's worth. They had it exactly backwards. She was the only one in the family who'd had any all along. NCTA. If this one stayed with you tonight, don't let it leave alone. Subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, and about a time someone looked down on you and got it wrong. I read every single one. Some stories never leave.